guys, welcome back to my second video on preparing for the UCAT. Today I'm going to be delving into the different sections which make up the UCAT, and I'll be giving you specific tips on how to handle these. So welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Maria and I'm a third year medical student studying at the University of Cambridge. So the first section in the UCAT that you'll have to grapple with is the verbal reasoning section. You will face 11 passages of text which will each be associated with 4 questions. Now, for each of these, you need to decide whether the piece of information that they're asking you about is true, false, or you can't tell. The other type of question that you have in verbal reasoning, you're going to have to draw a conclusion. So they'll give you 4 different options and you'll have to choose the correct one. So I think the verbal reasoning has a lot of strategy involved. Because it's so tight for time, you're going to have to really focus on what you're reading. You don't have enough time to read everything in detail and you have to be really careful about what you read. So what I would say is, before you actually look at the text, first read the questions. By reading the questions, that will guide you as to what parts of the text you'll even need to read. Using key pieces of information from the question, you can then scan the text. Once you've found something that matches, you read one line above and one line below. And you should read this very carefully. It's important to be scanning the text for key pieces of information. This includes dates and names. Also really important with this whole scanning process is to be looking out for synonyms. So words that are similar to the ones in the question, and these can also be things that you scan for as you're going through the text. It's also really important to be looking out for words that may try to trick you. Things like except and things like not. When you're in such a rush, these can really trick you. Also really important to learn the definitions of key command words, like the ones I have here. That will help you decide what the right answer is. Key tip I have, especially when you're running out of time, is the really easy questions that you tend to have in verbal reasoning. Things like always and never tend to be false. So if you're running out of time and you're in doubt about a question, these ones will generally be false and you'll be able to find this in the text. So that's a safe bet if you need to guess at any point. Another key thing with verbal reasoning is that you shouldn't be using outside knowledge at all. Even if you know something is false, that doesn't really matter. What matters is what the text says. Don't argue with it. Go in completely blind into the text. You know, you may know that dogs have 4 legs, but the text may say dogs have 6 legs. In that case, dogs have 6 legs. Don't argue with it. That is the right answer, even if you know otherwise. The verbal reasoning test requires you to be very strategic in the scanning because you do not have time to read everything in detail. You need to be very focused from the get-go. Section 2 is quantitative reasoning. So this section is focusing on your numerical skills, your ability to do relatively simple sums in very quick succession. There are some really important equations that you should know going into it and some key conversions. I've got them up here. It's like percentage change, speed, currency changes and conversions between kilometers and miles. Something that's going to really guide you in the quantitative reasoning section is looking at the answers to begin with. You need to see to what degree of accuracy they are, because you could go through the question and make some sort of assumptions and start rounding. And the thing is, you might round to such an extent that you'll get to the end of the question and you still can't determine the answer. So from the very start, check what the answers are like and to how much accuracy you'll need to have the answer. If it's to a really large degree of accuracy, it might be better off doing another question instead with the time you're saving there and just guessing that one. You have to be as strategic as you can to maximize the marks you can get. For this section, compared to some of them, the whole guess, flag and move on is really pertinent, and that's because the questions will vary in difficulty. If you know that you have a weakness, which is say currencies, you should really avoid those questions and focus on ones where you know you can get the marks. My biggest advice though is you need to really practice these questions. The more of these you do and the more you're exposed to the different sorts of quantitative reasoning questions there are, the better you'll feel in the exam and the more confident you'll be. Let's move on to abstract reasoning. So abstract reasoning was my best section by far. I got an 800 in this section. I liked it because I felt like there was less thinking and more kind of intuition. This is the sort of question that you'll get. It really relies on you determining what the different rules are for sets and the different patterns between boxes. There are some key patterns that you'll need to be looking out for, and one of the most common ways to summarize this is using scans. Scans stands for shape, color, arrangement, number, and size. So I think the best way to approach this is to first start with the simplest box. The simplest box will still be following the rules that you're looking out for, but they will have the fewest distractors. They like to make distractors things that really draw your attention to, so things like cool shading and patterns. It's also useful to only start with one element at a time and see if this is the thing that is the rule for your boxes. Also really important to remember the rules are only positive. There won't be a rule that's negative, so say the absence of something. There are three main types that you come across in abstract reasoning. The first one is to decide if a box is either in set A or in set B, so that's the rule it follows. In the second type, you need to decide which of the options that they give fits best into the set that they've provided. So what you need to do is you need to determine what the rule is for the set first, and then which of the options fits that set. In the third type, you will have a sort of question which is A is to B as C is to D. You need to see how A changes to B, and then you need to apply this to C to determine what box D will be. Since it's so short for time, you've only got 12 minutes for 55 questions, I wouldn't revert to the scans checklist all the time. Only if you're really struggling. A good way to save time is in the 1 minute before you start the section, write out your quick checklist, and then you can really quickly just review this as you're going through. So this will help jog your memory. It's really easy to get flustered during the exam, so I think it's important to have a good checklist that you can revert to whenever your mind goes blank. So the last of the sections that's graded in this way is the decision making. So you have 29 questions in 32 minutes. This is quite intuitive, and you have various logic puzzles here. They all follow very different types, and there's a big diversity of questions. I personally found that it was very useful to draw out diagrams for this, but I think the main thing here is to do a lot of practice and develop your own strategies for the different types of questions. Maybe my favourite section was actually the situational judgment section. So I got a band 1 for this. This doesn't actually feel as time pressured as you may expect. There are two main types of questions. So one of them is the appropriateness type of question, and the other one is the importance type of question. So they'll give you a short paragraph, and that will help set the context. From there, you'll need to decide whether a different approach is appropriate or something is important, and this will be done in 4 levels, between most appropriate, appropriate but not ideal, inappropriate but not awful, or completely inappropriate. The first thing you need to do here is you need to decide whether something is appropriate or not. So whether it's in the first half of the options or in the second half. It's generally not that difficult. It's generally more difficult to determine how appropriate a course of action is though. It's also worth remembering that if you're slightly off, so you're 1 off, you still get half marks. So say if the action was appropriate but not ideal, but you said it was completely appropriate, you still get half marks there. So it's definitely worth having an answer down, even if you're unsure. I would say it's really important to do practice for this section. One, because it's a standalone section that can't be made up for with another section, but also because you tend to see the patterns for yourself when you're doing these questions. That being said though, there are some very important guiding rules that can help you get through the section, and I'm going to go through those now. These will help guide you, and I think they're really useful. So the main ones I noted down were that you should never undermine public confidence in medicine and the health system. You should always try to maintain patient confidentiality where you can. You should address problems immediately, and seek local help. So there's no point escalating things to people who shouldn't really be getting involved. You should be the one reporting the wrongdoings yourself. So for example, if one of your friends is cheating in their exams, or let's say a doctor has a problem with alcoholism and is operating on a patient. That brings me on to the next thing, which is you have to be protecting the patient's safety and health as your main priority. This is super important. Another one I didn't really pick up on until quite late is that you shouldn't apologize on behalf of somebody else. If they've messed up, that's for them to deal with. It's not really your business to be apologizing for them. You should always ask for help where you need it, but of course, this shouldn't be like unnecessary. This goes without saying, but anything that's illegal is definitely wrong and you should not do that. You should try to respect patient wishes where you can, so that leads into the whole idea of patient autonomy, and the patient should have informed consent for this, so you should have explained the background well. You shouldn't lie. You should address the incidents with the people who have been involved appropriately. You should also prioritize emergencies. So if somebody's dying in the room, that should be dealt with first. That's just common sense though, and you should reassure patients, especially when they're distressed. Another thing that's worth looking into is laws on abortion and euthanasia within the UK. So just being comfortable with those, because they do tend to come up time and time again. I would suggest when you're going through this sort of question though, is to make notes or kind of be tracking the things that you tend to get wrong. This is really useful to then go through while you're preparing. Right, I think those are the main strategies that I have for each specific section. I hope they were really helpful, and if you've got any more, please pop them in the comments for other people to take a look at as well. If you've got a UCAT coming up soon, best of luck. I hope you enjoyed the video and hope to see you for the next UCAT prep session.